What's up, readers? I'm your host, Kaylin Barnett. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's K-12 Summer Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 500 library systems across the United States, Canada, and New Zealand, with the goal of making author talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. We've compiled a ton of great questions submitted by people when they registered, but remember, you can still ask live questions for our fabulous author today. Just hit the questions tab below the live feed. So without further ado, I'm so excited to talk to the award-winning one and only Rex Ogle about their book, Free Lunch, and their many other books. How are you doing, Rex?
I'm doing great. It's the middle of the summer. It's so nice to be out of school for 25 years.
I mean, summer break still feels like nostalgic, and all of this just like really sets the tone. Now, I was going to say, I mean, it says Rex Ogle, but I also see Ray listed there.
Yes.
Is that your alter ego?
It is. I am the third Rex in my family. Rex is Latin for king. So my abuela used to call me Rey Terciero, meaning the third king. So it's actually still my name. It's just like, because obviously my abuela is from Mexico and my dad is very white. So now I have two names to celebrate both my heritages.
I love that. I mean, I would personally be going around asking everyone to call me King, but I mean, hey. So Ray is actually, though, a pen. You use it as a pen name for some of your other stories, right?
Yes, I do.
What made you decide to use a pen name for some books and your name for others?
So when I was younger, I wanted to have like 30 pen names so that I could, I just thought it was fun to have like alter egos. But, in this day and age, we're supposed to, be on social media and have a brand and be ourselves, which I fully support. But when I worked in publishing, because I worked in publishing for 15 years at places like Marvel Comics, DC Comics, Scholastic. And when I was working at those places, I technically wasn't supposed to be writing at other places. But I was making very little money living in New York City, being, pursuing my dream of working in book publishing. So I made up Rey Terciero and I was writing secretly on the side.
How do you decide which name goes on which book?
So all of Rey Terciero books are very much an homage to my abuela. She was always putting classics in my hands. She wanted me to be, she came from Mexico. She came from very little. So to her, education was everything. And so she took me to the library all the time. And she got me books like Anne in Green Gables and Don Quixote and Count of Monte Cristo. And so all these classics that she used to put in my hand, I now take them and I reimagine them as modern day graphic novels. With the middle grade, it's more fantastical, magic, fun. With the young adult, it's like Dan and Green Gables or North Ranger, which are, a little more like high school fun stuff.
Love it. I love a reimagined classic. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I am curious, do you feel like your writer's voice is different between like you as Rex and you as Ray, or is it like the exact same person?
So it's funny. I feel like every single book I have a very unique voice. I mean, obviously with like Four Eyes, Pizza Face, Fruitcake, like that's a trilogy. Same thing with Free Lunch, Punching Bag, Road Home. Like those all have a very distinct voice, which are my voice because they're memoirs. But the rest of my books, I feel like I really let the characters come through as, I mean, in a way, because I like come up with the idea, I come up with the outlines. I had this book called When We Ride that came out earlier this year. Anyways, and When We Ride, it's so funny because I had an outline. I knew where the story was going. I gave it to my publisher. Like everything was going according to plan. And then in the last 30 pages, as I was writing it, it went a completely different direction. And the main character did something I never saw coming. And I was like, why did you do that? So in that way, it's like the voice comes to me as I'm writing, and then it kind of comes to life. And I feel like I suddenly become a vessel. Like I'm just there to punch the keys, but really the characters are writing themselves.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. I mean, we have learned a lot about you from your stories, especially, we're talking a lot about your memoirs, but obviously we're nosy and we want to know even more. Did you always want to be an author?
Only since I was 5. And I've always been very committed to the idea. There were a few, like I think when I was 6, I considered being an astronaut, and then I was like, space is scary because you can't breathe.
Yeah.
And then I think at one point I wanted to be a scuba diver. Then I saw the abyss, and I was like, oh no, that's how you drowned. So death became a deterrent to some of my dreams. And I was like, you know what? I'm very safe being a writer. Let's stick with that. That's the way to go.
If you weren't a writer today, what would you be doing?
Ooh, I mean, ideally, if I had any talent, a comic book artist. Since I do not have artistic talent, I think I would either be a librarian or a teacher. All the men in my family were military people, and all the women in my family were educators, and I always much more strongly identified with them. I loved reading. I love books. I love stories. So it would definitely need to be something with books. So yeah, librarian or English teacher.
Love that. Well, I mean, so you've written a bunch of different types of books. I've seen like the Star Wars books you've contributed to, the reimagined classics, memoirs. Where do you find inspiration?
Oh, here's the thing is, I've always had lots of ideas. I mean, like when I was like Dan and Green Gables, like that idea I had when I was 9, when I was reading Anne and Green Gables, I was like, I wish this was a boy character. So it's like that's a very old idea for me. And so I definitely am writing books that I wanted to read when I was younger.
Mhm.
But even now, I feel like if I'm just receptive to the world. Yesterday, I was walking my dog at 5 o'clock, watching the sun go down, and I live in Los Angeles, just off Sunset, which is a very big thoroughfare. And there was a street post, and it said group therapy, and it was like boom, I had a book idea. And so I like wrote the summary in my head the whole walk, and then by the time I came home, I just sat down and I typed it up, and I have a 2-page outline for a new book. So I
Oh,
think I think it's just like I put the ideas down, and then I'm like, okay, I'll come back to you later. But I do have a spreadsheet with like 200 ideas of books, and it's color coded.
what's the color code?
Oh, different genres, different age groups, different formats. Yeah. Is this
Very
horror? Is this? Oh my gosh, my brain is insane.
like Hamilton, right? Like writing nonstop. It's giving that vibe
Nonstop.
for sure.
Yeah.
Today, a lot of the questions are about free lunch. It deals with a lot of heavy topics. We've got poverty and DV, mental health. So I wanted to first say thank you for just being so vulnerable with us, but also thank you to our viewers who are engaging in these really necessary and tough conversations. So with that, Ryan asked, what inspired you to revisit your childhood for free lunch?
So if I'm being perfectly honest, which I try to always be perfectly honest, these are not books I wanted to write. These are stories I never wanted to tell. I never wanted to share with them. I was ashamed growing up of everything that was going on in my home life. Coming to school in secondhand clothes, being bullied because my mom worked at the local Chinese restaurant. Um, Being on food stamps at the grocery store, and like, if a kid saw me, like I would duck and hide or run away from my mom so no one knew that we were on food stamps. Um, I was very ashamed. I had a lot of just embarrassment. And of course, kids are cruel. So kids definitely made fun of me. My mom, we were very poor, but she moved us to one of the richest school districts in Texas because she wanted me to get a good education, which was an amazing choice. And I did get an amazing education just at the cost of my confidence and being picked on all the time. So these were not stories I wanted to share. And, knowing I wanted to be a writer, I always wanted to write fantasy or science fiction or horror. I wanted to be Stephen King or Suzanne Collins or, Frank Herbert, who wrote Dune. Like these were the stories that I loved growing up. And I applied to the top 12 creative writing programs in the country, creative writing, and they all rejected me. So then I moved to New York City to work in publishing because I was like, I'm from a trailer park in Texas. I don't know what I'm doing. I need to learn from the best people. And I was like, what better place than actually in publishing? And so while I was in New York for 15 years, I wrote 18 novels and about 24 comic book series issues number one. All of those were rejected, every single one. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, and I started asking people. I was like, I work in publishing, like I'm an editor, like I feel like I know what I'm doing. And they're like, well, plot, character, action, dialogue, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, then what do I not know? What am I missing? And they're like, you. I was like, what does that mean? They're like, where are you in this? Where are you in the story? Like anyone could write these books. They're great ideas, but there's nothing personal about them. There's no heart. There's no emotion. There's no soul. And so I considered this. I thought long and hard. I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. And I wrote Free Lunch. It was rejection number 14 out of the 18. And it was rejected. It was rejected by all the major publishers. I had 3 people who were interested. One said, can you make it young adult? And I said no, because then it's not true. Another one was like, can you make it a graphic novel and scrub all of the violence from it? And I said no. And then the third one was like, I would love to buy this, but can you take out all the poverty, domestic violence, and home instability? And I was like, that's the entire point of the book. So I wasn't trying to be difficult, but if it was going to be a memoir, if it was going to be true, I was like, I don't want to take out the true stuff. Like I committed to writing this book to discover me as a writer who needed to write more engaging personal stuff. And then through luck, literally 6 years later, I wrote a piece in the Huffington Post online. A publisher named Simon Boughton, who is starting a new imprint at Norton, read it and showed his girlfriend and said, this is a really good story. I wonder if this guy would write a novel. And she's like, I used to work with him. Do you want his phone number? And he called me and was like, do you want to write a book? And I was like, here you go. It's already done. So that is the story of Free Lunch.
That is crazy. It feels very much like the invisible string theory, like all those knows, but then he knew, this girl that you worked with. And it's crazy to read the book and think that it was rejected before, because it is just so wildly good. Why do it from like your younger self's perspective and not as like your adult self reflecting back?
Well, I've read a few like celebrity bios, and what always bummed me out about them is there was already a spoiler. The spoiler is like, we know this person is famous. We know they're rich. We know that they got what they wanted out. They followed their dream and then they got their dream. It's so easy to be like, well, yeah, like you're going back and looking at the hardships you survived. But what if I wrote the book from the point of view of me going through that horrible stuff and not knowing if I was going to survive? I didn't want to write a book being like, oh, look at all the pain I went through to get to where I am today. I wanted to write a book that said, this is the pain that I felt at that time. And for those readers out there who are going through the same things, like I want them to know they are seen, because I felt desperately, desperately alone when I was going through what I went through in Free Lunch. I thought I was the only kid going through that. Of course, this was pre-internet, before the internet existed. So it was much easier for me to feel alone. And I think now there are programs, there are resources, there are networks, there are communities where people can find help. Not just online, but, talk to your local librarian or teacher, and they can help you find resources. And I always say this to kids because I want them to know that I didn't have resources at the time, or if there were, I had no idea how to find them. But there are places today that can help you. And I try to always tell kids that, like, you're not alone and there are people who can help.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura from Lebanon Public was curious how you decide what to disclose to readers and what, parts of your story you want to keep, secret and safe to yourself.
Have they read my memoirs? I don't keep anything secret.
You never know.
I mean, honestly, like I go there. The biggest thing is like Free Lunch and Punching Bag and Road Home were much, much longer in their first drafts. Simon, my editor and publisher, gives the most amazing notes because basically I throw up everything on the page and then he helps me kind of form it, because like, yes, in Free Lunch, you saw a couple of violent episodes, but in 6th grade, there were a lot more violent episodes, but my publisher was like, we don't need to see it over and over and over and over again. Like, we only need to see it once or twice. We get the point.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess in that sense, like, there's a lot of truth, but there's also a lot of truth that I'm leaving out. But that's what happens when you tell a story, is you're crafting a thesis. And
Mhm.
so, you know, Free Lunch is about poverty and domestic violence. Like, my first girlfriend was Lakeisha. In fact, I covered that in 4.
Mhm.
I try to be honest at all times, and yeah, really, all of my friends know, like, nothing's off the table. I'm willing to discuss pretty much everything.
Everyone's like, "Oh my goodness, don't wrong Rex. We could be in the next book."
I'm not gonna lie, I may have hinted that to my mother-in-law one time. I was
You
like,
know,
watch yourself.
we talked to Marie Lou last week, and she said a few people who have wronged her, she's killed off in her books. Like, they inspired the enemy that she killed off. So, hey,
Yeah.
free game.
I will say one of my favorite stories, and I don't know if I've actually shared this with anyone but my friends. Recently, someone hit me up on Facebook. It was someone I went to middle school, junior high, and high school with, and they're like, "My son is reading your book," and I was like, "Which one?" And he was like, "Four Eyes," and I was like, and I was like, "Amazing!" I was like, "Well, you can tell him that you're the bully in the book," and he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe you should read the book," and so he read the book. And anyone who's read Four Eyes knows that, Victor's a complete jerk to me the entire book. But at the end of the book, we see his dad being a jerk to him.
Yeah.
And so he ended up, his real name is not Victor, but he did hit me back on Facebook. And after he read it, and he was like, I can't believe you saw that interaction with my dad. And he's like, thank you for including that, because otherwise, if I hadn't added that, he would just look like a complete jerk.
Yeah, and hopefully he's grown up, obviously, and is like setting a new example. I stick to the idea of we're all living life for the first time, so we make mistakes, and
100%.
doesn't make it right, but hopefully we
Yeah.
learn from those.
Yeah.
Because you write memoirs and you are so honest, like, do you ever take any creative liberties when you're writing? Like, you don't remember everything that happened as it did, so you have to fill in the blanks, or?
Honestly, I have a crazy good memory. My friends are always astounded because, like, I talked to one of my friends last year is one of my best friend in the book, and he's like, "How do you remember this stuff?" I was like, "I could draw you a map of your house that you lived in 6th grade," and he's like, So I drew it. I took a picture and I sent it to him on the phone, and he was like, "That's insane."
Wow.
So I have a great memory, but on top of that, what I do when I'm writing these books is the internet's really cool because you can type in the fall of 1989. What were the TV shows? What was playing on the radio? What movies were in theaters? And what I do is to get in the mindset, I
Mhm.
start listening to the music, watching the TV shows. I will Google, like, all the toy sets that I played with my brother, like with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like, I really get into the mindset. And then when I'm outlining the story, I outline it once, and then I go back over that outline, like, probably like 10 to 20 times over the next like 6 months before I actually write the book.
Mm.
And every time I do, I remember little bits, a little bit, a little more, a little more, a little more. And then, so really the only thing that I would say is faux made up is the dialogue, because there's
Mhm.
no possible way I'm going to remember exactly what people said, but
Right.
I remember the feelings of what they said.
Mhm. Wow. I'm sure, like, listening to some of the music and like looking back, it can feel very, like, probably a lot of good memories come up too. But like you were saying, some things they're hard, right? You're reliving
Yeah.
all these things. Diana was hoping that you could share what the experience is like trying to go back through all of those memories and actually putting it down on paper.
So for the last 20 plus years, I have been in therapy, trying different antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications. I've always, since I was a kid, dealt with very high, very low depressive episodes. Then when I have panic attacks, it's so crippling. I mean, the first time I had a true panic attack, I was working at a Tex-Mex restaurant in Austin, Texas called Chewy's, and it was Friday night, and I started getting shooting pains in my arm. My vision narrowed until, like, it looked like I was looking through a straw. I went outside in the parking lot and fell down, and I wasn't quite having seizures. I just could not move. Everything was agonizing.
Mhm.
And they rushed me to the ER in an ambulance, and they were like, nothing's wrong with you. You're having a panic attack. And at the time, I was like, I don't even know what that is. What is
Mhm.
a panic attack? And so for the last 20 years, I have been 25 years. I'm old. Oh, 27 years. I have been working on my mental health every way I knew how. I've corrected, like, I have a better diet. I exercise. I try to meditate a little bit every day. I try to um, make time for myself. I try, I've in seeking happiness. I've tried everything from ketamine treatments to anti-anxiety to antidepressants to um, yoga to acupuncture to uh, mushroom treatments to transcranial magnetic stimulation, which is like electroshock therapy for your brain. I feel like I have tried everything. Um, and it took me a long time to get to a place where I can be happy. And I will say, I think part of it was writing the memoirs, because when I finished the third one and I put it on my bookshelf, I felt like this huge weight lifted off of me.
Mm.
Um, because I had closed the book literally and figuratively on that chapter of my life. I was like, I took the first 20 years of pain in my life and I trapped them in 3 books. And now they're on a bookshelf where I keep them closed. And I pass them every day and I look at them and I just smile, because I'm like, I survived that. Um, and it's nice to know I survived that. But all of us have some kind of trauma. All of us are dealing with really heavy things at home, with friends, with the world, and it can feel very lonely. It can feel very painful. And I will say, when I was writing Free Lunch, I had panic attacks
Mm.
more than ever. I was super depressed. I'd be crying, like I'd be typing a chapter, and I would just be weeping like a baby. Um, and each book got progressively harder to write.
Mhm.
Uh, it was not an easy journey. There was a lot of pain that went into those books. Um, so I will say this: if anyone's trying to write a memoir, oof, you've got to focus on self-care. You really have to take care of yourself. Like, if it's too much, stop, close the laptop, go talk to friends, go outside, play with your dog. Like, it's it really takes a toll to revisit that kind of pain.
Yeah, Sherry had asked if you thought that writing the stories helped deal with the trauma. Would you recommend people like journaling their thoughts? Like,
Well, I will say I always journaled. Like, at a very young age, I started journaling. I think there was a teacher in 5th grade who, you know, just said, keep a journal. We had to keep a journal for class. And so I got in the habit of just writing a few words a day, then it became a few pages a day. And then I got to the point where, like, when I was in college, I would write, like 5 to 10 page essays every single night, handwritten. Um, yeah. So journaling really helped me get through a lot of hard times.
mm,
Uh, as for memoir writing, it's definitely a different muscle,
mhm.
uh, because you have to create a narrative out of your life, which is not the easiest thing.
Yeah. Interesting. There recently was a TikTok trend. I don't know if you're on TikTok, but it was this trend where it said, I met my younger self for coffee and I told them X, Y, and Z. What would you tell younger Rex?
Ooh, uh, it's a great question. A lot of people are like, if you could go back and change things, would you? And I do have the privilege and luxury of being in a place where my answer is no.
Yeah.
For a long time, that answer was, I'd be like, run away, or bet on this sports team because they're gonna win the Super Bowl and get that money and move away. Um, but now I think I don't want to influence what I lived through, but I will say I always felt there was a voice in the back of my head being like, keep going, one foot in front of the other, keep going, focus on the goal of writing. One day you'll write a novel, one day you will write many novels. Just keep going, one foot in front of the other. And I think maybe that was my voice from now,
Mm,
like, you know, psychically astral projecting, witchcraft, sci-fi, like sending my telepathic signals back in time and being like, you've got this, just keep going.
yeah. Maybe. Yeah, it feels like time traveling, all of that stuff, for sure. We had actually tons of questions from middle schoolers, parents, teachers, wanting to know all of this advice from you, and insight just into like middle school. So if you run out of ideas, which it doesn't seem like you will, maybe pick up an
Nope.
advice column, because I think people would just send that to you forever. Um, but Kendra asked, what advice do you have for middle schoolers dealing with maybe similar issues, but with this like added element of social media and feeling like they're less fortunate than their peers?
Yeah. Well, first off, I was pre-internet back in the day, so I cannot imagine what these kids are going through. I do have a lot of nieces and nephews, which I love. Mwah, to all my nieces and nephews. And so I've been able to ask them over the years, like, what are you going through? What are you dealing with? And so I've heard some of these stories firsthand. And of course, I listen to podcasts and the news, and it's like the stuff that these kids are going through with social media is so hard. I can't imagine, like, because when I was a kid, I felt alone and I didn't have social media, but now these kids are literally having joy and happiness and perfect bodies and perfect lives and rich parents like shoved in their face day after day after day. So I can't imagine like how hard it is to be comparing yourself to other people. But my advice would be to stop comparing yourself to other people, because here's the thing, people look at my Instagram, and for years, like Facebook and MySpace, all these social media things that I've had for years, and people have always assumed that I'm happy. Even friends in school that I went to school with always thought I was a clown. Like they thought I was like this happy, joyful guy, and it wasn't. It was just a mask that I put on because I was hiding all the horrible things at home. So when I would come to school with a black eye, they'd be like, "What happened?" And either I'd be like, "Oh, I got up playing football," which I never played football. Um, or I'd be like, "I'm clumsy." But I didn't want to come to school and be like, "My mom punched me in the face." Like, so I think a lot of kids are hiding their pain, and it's super easy to hide that on social media.
Mhm.
So when you look at other people's posts, just remember, like, they're only showing the best parts of themselves. They're not showing themselves crying or having a bad day or having a panic attack, because those aren't attractive posts. Um, yeah. And so, yeah, keep that in mind, that you're not seeing the whole picture.
Absolutely. I do feel like so many people put this highlight reel out, or they like alter things to make it look better. But then at the same time, it's nice. Like we could do something like this where you're sharing all of these experiences so that people
Yeah.
know that they aren't alone. So, yeah. Kind of on the flip side of this, Jennifer from Bucks County asked, what would you say to students and teachers, parents, that would help them be more understanding and welcoming to people who maybe are feeling in similar situations that you did?
Yeah. Well, I told you all the things that I did while I was trying to find joy, find happiness, get out of all the pain that I was in. And I read a lot of Buddhist books. I don't know that I would classify myself as Buddhist, but I have read many of those books, especially by a guy named Thich Nhat Hanh, who was exiled from his home country of Vietnam, question mark. But a lot of Buddhism is about not taking things personally, but more having compassion and kindness, not just towards others, but to yourself.
Mm,
Because it's so easy to beat ourselves up. It's so easy to be like, oh, you're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not smart enough. Like I've done that for decades. Like even a few years ago, like when I do school events, like I'd be like, I'm just some hick from Texas. And people would be like, you are not, like, stop. And I'd be like, I'm dumb. And I've had to work very hard, because I've always said, like, I'm not the brightest tool in the shed, but I work really, 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 really hard.
mhm.
Um, and I've always been quick to say I'm trailer trash, or, I'm not that smart. And people are like, you have to stop saying that. Even as an adult at 45, I am still not being kind and compassionate to myself. I've always been good at being nice to other people, but not to myself. So I would
Mhm.
say the first step is really treating yourself with love and compassion and taking care of yourself, but also like looking at other people and be like, you know, if they're having, oh, perfect example. The other day, I always try to smile, because one of the Buddhist things is like, if you smile, people will smile back. That is not always true. Um, I do. I try to smile. I try to acknowledge that everyone is a person. No one is invisible to me. But like I smiled at someone the other day on Sunset, and he like slammed his shoulder into my shoulder, and he said, "Well, I can't repeat it, but he said something very not nice to me." And rather than take it personally and be like, "Oh my God, like I deserve that. What did I do? What a jerk. Oh, I hate him." Like rather than get mad about it, I was like, he must be having a bad day.
Mm,
And you know what? What I can do is offer the compassion and kindness to be like, not take it personal. Let him have a bad day. If he wants to be a jerk, that is his choice. But I can choose how I react to his
mhm.
being a jerk. And rather than get mad about it or sad or take it personally, I'm just like, okay. And then I move on.
Yeah, we can only control ourselves. So,
Yeah.
um, when you were talking a little bit about, what was happening in free lunch, did you have a trusted adult that you felt like you could come to talk? I know you said you didn't have access to the resources or know that they were there, but was there anyone that you felt comfortable talking to about everything?
Just my abuela.
Mhm.
And even her, we saw each other so infrequently because my mom tried to keep us apart.
Mm.
Uh, And so I also didn't wanna weigh her down. I mean, she knew what was going on, but I didn't call her every time, my mom or my stepdad punched me. Like, there was no that didn't solve anything for me. It just made her feel powerless. Like, I did it a couple times and realized how much it hurt her, and so I stopped doing it. So, I kept a lot of it to myself. And the other thing is like, I remember in 2nd grade when my mom first got with my stepdad, the first time he beat her, I went to school and I told my counselor. And the next day, I was called back into the counselor's office, and my mom and stepdad were there. And the counselor was like, "It's very wrong for you to lie. You should not make up stories. Your mom told me that ever since your dad left, you hate anyone she brings home, and you're making up these stories, and you can't do that." And I was like, "I'm not lying, I'm telling the truth." And the
Mm,
counselor believed her over me. Now, mind you, this was 1986 in rural Texas. Like, it is a very different world now. I don't think a counselor would do that now. I do think counselors know better. I think that they are here to take care of kids, and I think they would listen and they would offer help.
mhm.
Um, I didn't have that growing up, and I didn't trust adults after that. So I learned at a very early age the only person I could trust was myself. But that I don't think that's the case anymore. I really do hope kids seek help because there is help out there.
Yeah, or like you said, trying to find like hotlines or things like that. We did have a live question that had come in from Thea, that kind of goes along with this. And she was wondering if you recommend, friends and family advocating for intervention in situations like this. Like, do you wish that more things would have happened, to intervene?
It's so hard to say. I mean, I have so many memories of the police coming to our house in 10th grade. My mom and stepdad were punching each other out like 2 a.m. They woke up our neighbors, Candace, Les, and Susan. Candace and Les were my age. Susan was her mom. And Susan would call me and be like, "Do you and your brother need to come over to spend the night?"
Mhm.
Uh, and we took her up on that offer many, 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 many times. But there were times like that one at 2 a.m. where the police showed up, and like my mom's, clothes are torn. She's obviously been hit. My stepdad's clothes are torn. He's obviously been scratched in the face. And of course, both of them are lying to the cops, being like, nothing happened.
Mm.
The cops can't do anything if they're being lied to. And then, of course, the cop pulls me aside. He's like, "Can you tell me the truth?" And I just said no, because as a 15-year-old, I don't want to send my parents to jail. I don't
Yeah.
want to be separated from my brother. And that's a lot of weight to put on a kid. The possibility of sending your parents to jail it's awful. And that's a weight that as a kid I didn't want to deal with. So it's so hard to say. I mean, when it comes to like friends and family advocating for you, I mean, it's such a tough situation because you don't want to tell on your parents, and so you end up suffering. It really does feel like an impossible situation, but I would tell kids to try to reach out to someone if they have a trusted adult, if they have a uncle or an aunt who can help, or a grandparent. Like,
Mhm.
they don't have to go through it alone.
Yeah. Oh, great advice. That is so tough, especially with like the fear of the unknown, even if you do say something. Oh, I'm sorry you went through that. Katie asked, how did your family feel when you finally published the story?
Oh, you like my devil's laugh? Here's the thing. At my high school graduation, which I did not invite my mom to, but my abuela invited her because I had moved out. I was living with my abuela. And my mom showed up, was like, I want to take you to lunch. And we went to lunch, my brother, my stepdad, my aunt, my cousin, my abuela. And she ended up hitting me in the restaurant. She gave me a bloody nose. I went to my own graduation with a very red face. So after I graduated, you know, all the families were like hugging their kids and being like, I'm so proud of you. I love you. Like, you're going to college. Your life is about to change. And my mom comes up to me and starts hugging me. 2 hours before she was smacking me around. And now she's like, I love you. I'm so proud of you. Like saying what the other parents are saying. And I was like, don't touch me. I was like, you have ruined the first 17 years of my life. And I promise you, I promise myself, and I promise the universe, you will not ruin the next 17 years. I've never slept under the roof with her since. I don't really have a relationship with her. When I wrote the book, I wasn't writing it with her in mind. I wrote it for me. I wrote it for kids out there going through the same thing. So after I had the book deal, when I got my very first copy in the mail, which an author usually gets like 6 weeks before, I wrote a letter and I sent it to her. And I said, here's a book that's about to come out. I'm not doing it to demonize you, but this is what happened. This is what you did. And it's a story that needs to be told. And, I'm sorry if you're hurt by it, but. And yeah, she never responded. And then years later, my brother had a kid. This was actually just 2 years ago. And he was like, she did not meet him because it was COVID, and she refused to get vaccinated because she said COVID wasn't real. But my brother worked in a COVID unit and was watching people die from COVID every day. And he's like, you're not meeting my kid until you get vaccinated. And she refused for years. And then finally he was like, okay, let's go to a lunch. And if you can behave yourself for 1 hour, you can meet your kid. And he asked me to go along, and she ended up throwing the table in the middle of the restaurant. It was Tex-Mex, so chips and salsa everywhere. The manager screaming, I'm going to call the cops. And she's screaming at my brother. And then she's screaming at me, being like, I read your book. You said I was a deadbeat. And I was like, I never said that. I've never used that word in my life. So she was not happy. She was not happy that it exists. But I'm like, this isn't about you. And it hasn't been for a long time, because at 17, I had to make the choice to put myself first. And that's a really hard thing to do.
Yeah. How's your relationship with your brother?
Super tight. I love him so much. We talk all the time. I have 2 nephews. They both love monster trucks. I love monster trucks. When I go, we just play monster trucks. Yeah, me and my brother are very close. I will say I got his permission to publish the book. Him and my abuela asked permission before. I was like, I got a book deal. I'm going to write this. They both said yes. He said he read it. He never read it. I found out last year that he never read it because he listened to the audiobook for the first time, and it really deeply affected him. He went to a depression and really had to deal with it because he had basically not dealt with it for 20 years. So yeah, I think it was really hard for him to re-experience all that trauma.
Yeah, I'm sure. Oh, I mean, we've been talking about so many important but hard things. So to try to maybe
I'm so happy.
A little bit, I have a very quick would you rather Rex edition to see what maybe some of the things that you would rather have or care about nowadays. So first things first, speaking of audiobooks and audiobooks and physical books, are you more of a physical copy or an audiobook?
Print books, always print books. I cannot read on a screen. I have to hold a book in my hand. There's something about it. I love going into bookstores, libraries, like the smell. Oh, I love that smell.
Hopefully our viewers who are in the library, maybe they think the same. What about, speaking of 4 eyes, are you still a glasses kind of guy or contacts?
I wear contacts because I cannot find a pair of glasses that don't slip off my nose and give me a
Yeah.
headache because they press right here. And I
Mhm.
finally found some. And I don't love the way they look on my face, but I love the way they feel on my face.
Mhm.
So I'm actually going to the optometrist this week to get a new prescription and get those glasses. So
Good.
I do. Here's the thing: is I hated glasses as a kid, but now as an adult, I'm like, glasses are
That's
cool.
beauteous. Yeah.
Yeah. So 50, I'm 50-50.
It's like the trend to wear them.
Yeah.
Hot dog or hamburger?
Hot dog, which is a sandwich, and I will fight anyone who disagrees with me. Hot dogs are sandwiches. It's meat and bread. It is a sandwich.
I agree. I agree because
Thank
it's
you.
giving like hoagie vibe, and hoagie's a sandwich to me. So,
Yes.
hey.
Yeah.
Hiking or like a beach vacation?
I hike all the time. I went on a backpacking trip last year that was very healing for me, but I'm a swimmer. I love being in the water more than anything. So bring on the water.
Love it. What about cat
Dogs,
stuff?
dogs,
And
dogs.
you have a dog, right?
Toby.
Yes.
If
Yeah.
you follow me on Instagram, there's so many pictures of him. I love that. He's my first dog. I've wanted one my whole life, and I got him when I turned 40, and I love him more than anyone else on the planet. He's
Like
the best.
it's so great to be an adult. I can have like ice cream for breakfast. I can buy a dog if I want to. Yeah.
Yep.
All
Yeah.
right. Maybe the most controversial, but
Marvel. Oh, X-Men. Of course, X-Men. Oh, I love the X-Men. X-Men are great.
I did see that. Who is your favorite X-Man?
Ilyana Rasputin, aka Magic with a K. She is the younger sister of Colossus.
Uh-huh.
And it's funny because I recently figured out why I like her so much,
Uh-huh.
which is when she was 7, she was pulled into a hell dimension and she was raised by a demon who abused her and violated her, like took pieces of her soul out of her and reforged them as weapons. Now, she eventually escaped hell and she's a teleporter, which I think is the coolest power ever. But anytime she was attacked, this special armor would appear and protect her, and it was made from her soul. She also had a soul sword, which was also made from her soul. So
Mhm.
she took all of her pain and all of that trauma and she turned it into armor. And that just really resonates with me. And I never understood that as a kid, but as an adult now, as a writer, I'm like, oh, that's why I love her so much because she's a survivor. And there's something about survivors that I think is so important because all of us, if we stay strong, if we're tough, we can survive.
I love that. Speaking of like the survival and our favorite superheroes, in the resources tab for our viewers, they can write their own memoir. Hopefully, some of your advice on like looking back helps them for that. They can also turn their friends into their favorite
Ooh,
superheroes, create their own superhero, even come up with new costumes. So
nice.
maybe reflect in some of that.
I kind of
I've
want
got
to do that.
maybe you should. Yeah. You come up with a costume. We'll share that one next.
Yeah.
It'll be the new favorite superhero. Um, so, I mean, we're nearing the end of our time together, which is very unfortunate. But I do want to talk about you just released Dan and Green Gables, which is a reimagined
Yes.
classic. You kind of talked about like your abuela giving you the classics and reimagining it. Like, why do that now? Like, what's the story like for Dan and Green Gables?
Here's the thing is like, I feel like for hundreds of years, there were a lot of white people writing these books, and a lot of them came from privilege, especially the men. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, well, Jane Austen wrote romance. And I'm like, Jane Austen wrote social commentary. And if you read these books, they're classics for a reason. They're important stories. But I feel like we live in a new age, in a new world. And it's so important to take old stories and revisit them now
Mhm.
because the world is different now. Dan and Green Gables is very much a love letter to my grandparents who, did not accept me for who I was. And that was a really hard thing to deal with as a kid. And for me, like Anne in Green Gables was a classic because it's about a girl trying to find a home and really putting in the effort to build a home and prove herself as a worthy person. And that's been a big theme in my life. So of course I wanted to write about it, but I didn't want to steal it without being obvious that I'm stealing it. I didn't want to be a shady thief. I wanted to be an honest thief. So that's why I'm not trying to hide that is a stolen story, but it is reimagined, meaning like I didn't go back and reread it. I haven't read it since 4th grade. I
Mm.
just went based on what I remember and then wrote my own story. And that's basically what I do with all my classic retellings.
Wow, love that. Very, very interesting. Okay, last question. What was the last book you read that our viewers should immediately check out of their library?
Okay, some people will probably say it's violent. I don't think it's violent if you play video games, but the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, there are
Mm.
7 of them. They've been coming out every 3 months for the last year. I'm on book 4 right now out of 7. It is so good. It's basically Hunger Games meets video games meets Dungeons and Dragons meets reality TV. It's so good. Oh my God. And it follows this guy, one of the last survivors of the planet Earth, and his cat, Princess Donut, is turned into like a talking cat, and they're best friends, and they're going through this together, and it's so good. It's so good, and it's such a fun adventure. Yeah, I love it. It's so fun.
Love it. Great recommendation. Well, I mean, I could talk to you forever, but unfortunately,
Same.
we're out of time. You've been such a delight. And while like we said, we talked about so many deep things, but definitely gives a lot of hope and a lot of lightness to all of this. So thank you so much for chatting with us. And a huge
Pleasure.
thank you to our viewers for tuning in to another author talk. Without your support, none of this would be possible. And we thank you for choosing to spend a little part of your day with us. As a reminder, below the live stream video, you can find the link to the resources and all of Rex's books. So until our next author talk, happy reading.
Take care, everybody.